The eviction notice was taped crookedly across the apartment door. Emma Larson stood in the hallway staring at it for nearly a minute before touching it. 3 months behind on rent, final notice, vacate within 72 hours. At 24 years old, she owned exactly 2 suitcases, a rusted sedan with a failing transmission, and a bank account containing $11.38. The dream had collapsed faster than anyone expected. The small bakery she'd poured everything into had survived only 14 months before debt swallowed it whole. Her business partners disappeared. Friends stopped answering calls. Even her family, exhausted by years of watching her chase impossible plans, had quietly stepped back. By the 3rd day, she loaded her belongings into her car and drove north with no destination. Rain followed her for hours. Late that afternoon, she stopped in a tiny town called Ashcroft, population barely 800. She wasn't looking for a home. She was looking for somewhere to sleep. Near the edge of town, a handwritten sign leaned against a fence. Auction today. Everything must go. Curious and desperate, Emma followed the crowd. Most people came for equipment, old snow sleds, broken machinery, scrap metal. At the back of the property stood a weather-beaten wooden structure half buried in weeds, an abandoned ice harvester shed. Nobody seemed interested. The auctioneer laughed when bidding reached $10. Anyone else? Silence. Emma looked at the single $10 bill folded in her pocket. It was enough for 1 meal, or 1 tank of gas. Instead, she raised her hand. The hammer fell. The crowd chuckled. Just like that, the poorest person in town owned the one building nobody wanted. What she didn't know was that beneath the shed waited a mystery that would change far more than her life, and it started with a locked door hidden under the floor. The next morning, Emma returned. The shed sat beside a frozen pond long abandoned by commercial harvesters decades earlier. Gray boards creaked beneath her boots. Wind slipped through cracks in the walls. Inside, dust covered everything. Hooks hung from rafters, ancient pulleys swayed gently overhead. The place smelled of old wood, rust, and winter. Someone had worked here for years, then simply vanished. Emma spent hours clearing debris. Near sunset, she dragged aside a stack of broken crates. Something unusual caught her eye, a metal ring embedded in the floorboards. She knelt, pulled, nothing. The hatch was stuck. Using a crowbar she'd found outside, she forced it open. Cold air rushed upward. Not cool air, cold air, as if winter itself lived below. A narrow staircase disappeared into darkness. At the bottom sat a cellar carved into earth and stone. Ice harvesters once stored massive blocks there before refrigeration existed. Emma switched on her flashlight. Rows of empty shelves lined the walls. Most were bare, but one corner remained untouched, covered with dust, stacked neatly. Dozens of leather-bound notebooks. She carried one upstairs. The cover contained only a name, Walter Finch. No title, no explanation, just a name nobody in town seemed to mention. That night, sleeping in her car beside the shed, Emma opened the first notebook. The handwriting was precise, careful. The first page wasn't about ice harvesting. It was a list. Names, dates, addresses. Next to each name sat brief notes. Needed winter boots. Lost husband. Tuition paid anonymously. Groceries delivered. Mortgage covered. Emma turned pages faster. Hundreds of entries. Maybe thousands. The notebooks weren't business records. They were records of help. But why would an ice harvester keep secret notes about strangers? And how had he afforded it? The deeper she read, the stranger the mystery became. The following morning, she asked around town. Most people remembered Walter Finch. Their reaction surprised her. "Oh, old Walter?" A waitress shrugged. "Quiet fellow." A mechanic laughed. "Kind of odd." An elderly man shook his head, kept to himself. Nobody spoke warmly. Nobody seemed impressed. To Ashcroft, Walter Finch had been little more than a lonely man who spent his entire life harvesting ice long after everyone else had modern freezers. A harmless relic, a forgotten eccentric. Yet Emma had spent all night reading evidence suggesting something entirely different. That afternoon, she found another notebook, then another. Each revealed new stories. A widow whose electricity bill mysteriously disappeared, a teenager whose college application fee had been paid, a family whose farm survived a drought after anonymous assistance arrived. Every story ended the same way. No credit, no recognition, no explanation, just a quiet note in Walter's handwriting. Problem solved. Why? Emma couldn't stop wondering. Who spends an entire lifetime helping strangers without telling anyone? The mystery deepened when she discovered photographs hidden inside a wooden box. Hundreds of them. Families standing in front of homes, graduation pictures, wedding photos, store openings, community celebrations. None included Walter, yet his notes appeared on the backs. Helped her after fire. Needed confidence more than money. Never tell him it came from me. Emma felt something shift inside her. For the first time in months, she was interested in tomorrow. She needed answers. 3 days later, Emma met Clara Jensen, 90 years old, sharp-eyed, living alone near the church. When Emma mentioned Walter Finch, Clara became quiet. Very quiet. Then tears appeared. "You found his records." Emma nodded. Clara stared out the window. People judged him wrong. The old woman explained. When Clara was 19, her husband died in a logging accident. She had 2 children. No income, no future. One winter, firewood began appearing on her porch, then groceries, then school supplies. For years, she never learned who sent them. Only decades later did she discover Walter was responsible. "He saved us," Clara whispered. "But if you thanked him, he'd change the subject." Emma left shaken. The notebooks weren't exaggerations. They were true. Every page represented a real life. Yet another question emerged. How many people had Walter helped? The answer grew larger every day. A retired teacher revealed Walter paid for eyeglasses for students. A shop owner described receiving anonymous assistance after a burglary. A farmer credited an unknown benefactor for saving his land. Again and again, story after story, like invisible threads connecting the entire town. Emma began feeling ashamed. She judged the shed immediately. Everyone judged Walter immediately. A poor old ice harvester, an outdated man clinging to a dying profession. But the evidence told a different story. Walter wasn't preserving ice. He was preserving people. Then Emma discovered something alarming. Tucked inside the latest notebook was a county notice. Property transfer records, maps, legal documents. The shed and surrounding land sat directly in the path of a proposed development project. Luxury cabins, private waterfront access, commercial expansion. The proposal had been delayed for years. Now it was moving forward. Emma visited town hall. The clerk confirmed her fears. A development company had already begun negotiations. If approved, the old shed would likely be demolished, the cellar destroyed, everything lost. Emma looked around the room. Nobody seemed concerned. After all, it was just an abandoned ice shed. Nobody knew what rested beneath it. Nobody understood what Walter had built. For the first time since arriving in Ashcroft, Emma felt fear. Not for herself, for the story. If the shed disappeared, decades of hidden kindness would disappear with it. She had little money, no influence, no legal expertise, and almost no chance of stopping the project. Yet she couldn't walk away. Over the following weeks, she cataloged everything. Photographs, journals, letters, records. The deeper she dug, the more astonishing the truth became. Walter's help stretched across 3 generations. Parents, children, grandchildren. Entire families had unknowingly benefited. One evening, Emma organized a small gathering in the town library. She expected 10 people, maybe 15. Instead, nearly 60 arrived. She displayed copies of Walter's journals, read passages aloud, shared photographs. At first, the room remained silent. Then stories emerged. A man described receiving winter boots as a child. A woman remembered tuition assistance. Another recalled medical bills mysteriously paid. The room grew emotional. People began connecting dots they'd never connected before. For decades, they had assumed different anonymous acts came from different sources. Now they realized many trace back to one man, Walter Finch, the forgotten ice harvester. News spread quickly. The next meeting attracted more people, then more. Something unexpected was happening. The community was remembering, not because Emma asked them to, because the evidence awakened memories they had carried for years. When the development company held a public hearing, residents filled every seat. Teachers spoke, farmers spoke, business owners spoke, retirees spoke. Many had never attended a town meeting before. None sounded angry, none sounded political. They simply told stories, story after story. The kind of story that can't be measured on spreadsheets. A life saved, a family preserved, a future protected. The developer listened respectfully. Even they seemed moved. But regulations remained, approvals remained. Nothing was guaranteed. Then, just when hope seemed fragile, Emma made the final discovery. Behind a loose stone in the cellar wall sat a narrow wooden box. Inside rested a single envelope. No records, no photographs, no lists, just one letter, written in Walter Finch's hand. The outside read, "For whoever comes next." Emma sat alone in the cellar when she opened it. The words were simple, not dramatic, not poetic, not written for history. The letter said, "If you're reading this, the building belongs to you now. People will tell you this place stored ice. They're not wrong, but ice was never the important thing. The important thing was having a reason for people to stop by. Everyone carries something heavy. Most never talk about it. If you listen long enough, they'll tell you. Then you help if you can. Not because it changes the world, because it changes their day. And enough better days become a better life. Don't worry about being remembered. Most good things happen quietly. The goal was never to matter. The goal was to care." Emma lowered the letter. The cellar felt impossibly still. For months, she had searched for some grand secret, some hidden explanation. Instead, she found something much smaller and much larger. Walter hadn't been trying to become important. He had simply decided that every person mattered. That was all. Weeks later, county officials announced a compromise. The shed and cellar would be preserved as a community landmark. Not because of politics, because too many people stepped forward with stories impossible to ignore. The building remained standing, but the most important change happened inside Emma. She stopped searching for what she'd lost, the bakery, the money, the failed dreams. Instead, she began restoring the shed, not into a museum, into a gathering place, a warm room with coffee, tables, books, resources, a place where people could stop by and talk, a place where nobody needed a reason to enter. Years later, visitors still arrived asking about Walter Finch. Emma always showed them the cellar, the journals, the photographs, the letter. But before they left, she asked them one question. Who helped you when nobody had to? The answers were never the same, yet every answer carried the same lesson. The people who shape our lives are often invisible while they're doing it. They don't make headlines, they don't seek applause. They simply show up, again and again, quietly, faithfully, kindly. On winter evenings, Emma sometimes stood outside the old shed, watching lights glow through the windows. People talking, laughing, helping one another. The mission continued, not because anyone ordered it to, because someone had lived that way first. A man almost everyone overlooked. A man who harvested ice, and somehow harvested hope, long after his name should have been forgotten. The journals remained, the photographs remained, the stories remained. But perhaps Walter Finch's greatest achievement wasn't what he left behind. It was the people who continued because of him. And maybe that's the closest any of us come to immortality. Not wealth, not fame, not monuments. Just the quiet evidence that someone's life became better because we were here. And somewhere, years from now, perhaps another struggling soul will walk through those doors searching for a second chance. They'll find warmth, they'll find community, and they'll discover what Emma finally learned. The greatest lives are often invisible while they're being lived.